All right, today we're diving into the life of Catherine of Siena, one of history's most intense mystics. But here's the thing, to really get who she was, we're not starting at the beginning. We're going to start at the very end, with the incredible mystery of her death.
Yeah, that's right. To understand her life, we have to look at her death. And this wasn't just some quiet passing. It was an event so strange, so out there, that the people who were actually there, who witnessed it, wrote down every single detail.
Now listen to this quote. The shocking part is that this isn't some legend that popped up hundreds of years later. No, this is from an eyewitness, a guy named Barduccio di Piero Canigiani, who was right there in the room with her. It's a totally baffling description, right?
So, Barduccio's letter gives us this crystal clear timeline. Catherine passes away on a Sunday. Now, you'd think they'd bury her pretty quickly, right? Nope. Her body is kept out on display for 3 full days. And think about this. We're talking about 14th century Italy. In the heat, that should have been a disaster. But not only was there zero decay, people were actually flocking to see her and claiming that miracles were happening right there in front of them.
Okay, so this just begs the question, doesn't it? It's really the core question we're trying to answer today. Who was this woman, Catherine of Siena? What kind of life do you have to live for it to end in a way that seems to just break all the rules of nature? To get that answer, we've got to look past the halo, look past the saint and see the actual woman. And let me tell you, her physical life was, well, by any standard, it was just relentless self-inflicted hardship. That same eyewitness, Barduccio, he tells us her whole life was just defined by extremes. For one, she found food so disgusting she could hardly eat anything. She was in constant, terrible pain. And her body, it was so emaciated from this lifestyle that he literally described her as looking like a skeleton. I mean, we're talking about a life lived on the absolute razor's edge of what a human body can endure. And this quote, it just perfectly captures her mindset. She didn't see all this suffering as some tragedy, not at all. For her, it was a spiritual necessity. She believed her pain was not only something she deserved, but that God's grace actually eased it, just enough to let her bear what should have been unbearable. So, and this is the key takeaway here, for Catherine, the body wasn't just something to live in, it was a tool for spiritual work. So, you have this incredibly intense physical life, right? Well, that was the bedrock, the foundation for an equally intense spiritual life. And lucky for us, she documented it in what's now considered one of the great masterpieces of Christian mysticism. That work is called The Dialogue of Divine Providence. But what's fascinating is, it's not a book she sat down and wrote. Nope, she dictated it to her scribes while she was in a state of ecstasy. This deep, trance-like spiritual state. The whole book is set up like a direct conversation, a real back and forth between her soul and God. And the two speakers in this dialogue are super clear. On one side, you've got the soul, or die Seele, and that's Catherine. She's the one asking all the big, profound questions. And on the other side, divine providence, or die göttliche Vorsehung, which is the voice of God, patiently answering her, explaining the very nature of reality. It's such a cool structure for a theological work, isn't it? Okay, so inside this conversation, God gives Catherine this one single, incredibly powerful metaphor that explains the entire spiritual journey. And honestly, it's the absolute key to understanding her whole worldview. And that metaphor is a bridge. That's it. So simple, right? But it's also elegant and just so profound. Pretty much everything she believed about how a person can find their way back to God is wrapped up in this single image. So in the dialogue, God lays it all out. The bridge has 3 steps, and they actually correspond to parts of Christ's body. The first step is at the feet. This is where you lift yourself up and away from all the stuff of the world. The second step is at his side, where you discover his heart and you get filled with love and virtue. And that third and final step, that's at the mouth, where you finally find peace and you can actually taste the divine. But why a bridge? What's the point of that metaphor? Well, God tells Catherine to imagine life as this raging river. It's full of sin and temptation, and it separates all of us from eternal life. The bridge, which is Christ, is the one and only way to get across that dangerous river safely. It's the path home, the path back to God.
And this brings us full circle, right back to where we started. Because for Catherine, this bridge wasn't just some nice idea to write about in a book. Oh no, it was a real path, a path that she had to walk. And here is the absolute knockout point that connects everything. Her life of suffering. It wasn't separate from her ideas. It was her theology. She was making it real. She was trying to physically live out the entire journey of crossing that bridge with her own body. When you actually read the accounts from people who knew her, you start to get it. You can see both sides, the brutal, raw reality of her physical pain and the absolute beauty of her spiritual quest. They're not fighting each other. They're two sides of the exact same coin. Let's just break it down, side by side. All that extreme fasting, rejecting any kind of comfort, the constant pain, that was her taking the first step on the bridge. That was her soul literally lifting its feet off the ground of the world. And then her mystical writings, those incredible ecstatic visions of divine love, that was her reaching for the final step, trying to taste that peace of God.
So what's the big takeaway here? What do we leave with? Catherine of Siena was, without a doubt, a brilliant mystic who boiled down her complex ideas into this one powerful, unforgettable metaphor of a bridge. But she was so much more than that. She was a woman whose entire life was a radical, physical performance of what she believed. And for her, the suffering was never the point. It was the path. It was the bridge you had to cross to get to the other side. And that leaves us with one final thought, one last question to chew on. Catherine of Siena tried to literally turn her entire being, her body and her soul, into a bridge to God. Now, her path was extreme, for sure, but it makes you think, doesn't it? In our own lives, in our own way, what does it mean to make our life a bridge?